All right, so these are the notes for 2-4 day 2, solving multi-step inequalities. And for this section, the variables are going to be on both sides of the inequality. So many of the rules for solving equations apply to solving inequalities, except when multiplying or dividing by a negative number, the inequality symbol must be flipped. Okay, that's the only difference between solving equations and solving inequalities. Okay, so for number 1, right now we're dividing the sum of -7 plus x by 3. So our first step, we're going to multiply both sides by 3. Very similar to the concept of eliminating fractions. So 3 over 3 is 1. So on the left side, we have -7 plus x is less than -9. Now to the x variable, we're adding -7. So to undo that, we're going to add +7 to both sides. And -9 plus 7 is -2. Make sure your number line is increasing, meaning going from smallest to largest. It's going to be open at -2 and shaded to the left because it's less than. With number 2, we have 2 options of solving. So just like with number 1, how we were dividing that sum, that numerator, by 3, so we multiplied both sides by 3 to undo that, we can do the same with number 2. So because we're multiplying the sum of 7x plus 1 by 3, we can divide both sides by 3 to start. That helps keep the coefficients and the numbers in the inequality smaller, and it kind of makes it one less step to solve. So this is a good idea because 165 is a multiple of 3. So we know if we go and divide both sides by 3 to start, we know the right side will be a whole number. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. So on the left side, 7x plus 1 is greater than or equal to -55. Okay, if that makes you uncomfortable or you're like, oh no, I prefer to distribute and then solve from there, by all means, you can certainly still do that. and solve after you distribute. Your choice. Now this only works because we only have one term on the left side, so we were able to divide both sides by 3. So let's continue on the left side. Right now to the x term, we're adding 1, so we can subtract 1 from both sides. Now we're multiplying 7 times x, so we can divide both sides by 7. If you prefer to distribute and kind of keep it the same and follow the same steps for every problem, that's totally fine. So on the right side, after you distribute, you would subtract 3 from both sides. And divide both sides by 21. Okay, again, a benefit of dividing first is it keeps all of your numbers smaller, but a benefit of distributing is it's following the same steps each time. So it's up to you. So it is going to be filled in at -8 because -8 is included in the possible solutions, and shaded to the right to show all values greater than. With number 3, we have more than just multiplying on the left side, so our only choice is to distribute first. Okay, so it's because we're adding that 3x as well that we can't just jump in and divide both sides by 5. So when we distribute 5 times 5x minus 1, we have that 3x term. 5 times 5x is 25x. 5 times -1 is -5. Our next step would be to combine like terms. 3 plus 25 is 28. They both have an x, so it's 28x. Right now to the x term, we're subtracting 5. So the inverse operation would be to add 5 to both sides. (28) times x, so the inverse operation would be to divide both sides by 28. And -140 divided by 28 is -5. -5 is not included in the possible solutions, So it's going to be open or not filled in at -5. And it's all values greater than, so we want to shade to the right. With number 4, we want to simplify first. So we want to combine like terms on the left. 8x minus 5x is 3x. And now we have variables on both sides of the inequality. So we want to add or subtract terms to get variables to one side of the inequality and the constants or those plain numbers to the other side of the inequality. I personally try to always have my variables on the left side so it makes it easier to graph in the end. With this inequality, we really have no choice but to have the variables on the left because right now it's only a variable term on the left. So it makes sense to keep it on the left. So it's a positive 5x on the right. So we're going to subtract it from both sides to move it over. (3x minus 5x is negative 2x. That's negative 2 times x. So the inverse operation would be to divide both sides by negative 2. And it's that step there, it's dividing both sides by a negative number, that requires us to flip the inequality symbol. So it was less than or equal to. It's now going to flip to be greater than or equal to. X can be equal to -7, so it's going to be a filled in circle at -7. And it's all values greater than or equal to, so we're going to shade to the right. Okay, so the same steps apply here to solving equations. We simplify first, then we collect variables to one side, preferably the left, and the constants or those numbers without variables to the other side. Okay, so for 5, let's simplify the left side first. We can combine like terms. 7x minus 2x. 7x minus 2x is 5x. Okay, so now we want to collect variables to one side, constants to the other. I'm going to choose to collect variables to the left. So to do that, I'm going to subtract 7x to be able to move that 7x term over. Now I think we're almost at a point where we can move both terms in the same step, but for now I think it's smart to kind of keep it a separate step so that you don't try to do too much at once. So now we want to move the -4 to the right. So to do that, we need to add it to both sides. So we have -2x is less than 10. So that's -2 times x. So to solve, we'll divide both sides by -2. And again, it's that step there that requires us to flip the inequality symbol. It was less than. We now need to flip it to be greater than. -5 is not included because it's just, sorry, just greater than. So we open our non-filled in circle at -5. Shaded to the right for all values greater than -5. Okay, number 6, we first need to simplify. So to do that, we have to distribute. Make sure you multiply both the x and the 2 by -8. Then we want to combine like terms. Now -8x plus 8x is 0x, which just equals 0. So those terms cancel out. Okay, so now we only have constants on the right, so we're going to keep those numbers on the right. So we want to move that -25 over. To do so, we're going to add it to both sides because it's currently negative. So on the left, we have 3x is less than positive 9. So our last step to solve would be to divide both sides by 3. Three is not included, so it's going to be open or not filled in at 3. And it's all values less than, so we're shading to the left where the values are less than 3. All right, for our 2 word problems, our first word problem is dealing with perimeter. Now remember, the perimeter formula is 2L plus 2W. 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. So we have 2 dimensions. Doesn't matter which one is the length and which one is the width, but one of them is 12. Let's call that the length. And the other dimension is 2x minus 3. Let's call that the width. So what we are going to do is we're going to substitute these values. We're going to substitute L equals 12 for L in the perimeter formula. And we're going to substitute 2x minus 3 in for W. Now the perimeter is greater than 70 feet. So we will add that once we substitute it in as well. Okay, so there's our substitution. This perimeter is greater than 70 feet. Okay, so now let's simplify the left side. 2 times 12 is 24. And we're going to distribute the 2. Okay, so either one of those could represent the inequality for the situation. You could have what we first substituted in for, or you could have after you distribute. So now let's find the values for x that make the perimeter greater than 670 feet. So combine like terms on the left. 24 minus 6 is 18. Subtract 18 from both sides. So once you subtract 18 from both sides, we get 4x is greater than 52. So our last step to solve would be to divide both sides by 4. So the values of x that make this perimeter greater than 70 feet would be anything greater than 13. Okay, so x needs to be greater than 13. We don't need to interpret that solution because the question was just asking to find the possible values of x, and the possible values of x is anything greater than 13. And remember, these filled out notes are posted in Canvas, and the video of these notes will also be posted in Canvas for you to review after class, or when you're working on the homework assignment, or when you're preparing for the summative. It will always be there for your reference. All right, so our last word problem, we are in a trivia challenge, and we need an average score of at least 90 points to advance to the next round of this touchscreen trivia game. Okay, so keywords there, we need to be at least. We want to find out what scores in the fifth game will allow us to advance. So we're talking about the average. So how we find the average is we take the sum of the scores Okay, so you add up the 5 games, so game 1 plus game 2 plus game 3 plus game 4, and then we divide that by the total number of scores. Okay, so we're going to include game 5 even though we don't know what game 5 is. So we're going to add up game 1 through game 5 and then divide by 5 because we have 5 scores. So because we don't know the score in game 5, that's what X represents. Okay, so we're going to add up the 4 scores we do know. So we add up 95 plus 91 for game 2, plus 77 for game 3, plus 89 for game 4. And then we need to also include X to represent the 5th game. So this is 5 scores. So we're going to divide this sum by 5. And this needs to be at least, so greater than or equal to 90. Okay, so let's simplify this first. Let's add up the 4 scores we do know. So game 1 plus game 2 plus game 3 plus game 4 is 352. Okay, so we're dividing the sum of 352 plus x by 5. So our first step to solve would be to multiply both sides by 5. Get rid of that denominator. Five over 5 is 1. That's why we multiplied by 5. So on the left, we have 352 plus x is greater than or equal to 450. So to solve, to find values of x, possible values in that game 5 to be able to advance, we're just going to subtract 352 from both sides. Okay, so the values of x, meaning the score in the fifth game, need to be at least a 98 in order for you to advance. Okay, that's it for the 2-4 day 2 notes on solving multi-step inequalities, including inequalities with variables on both sides.